Okay, so many months ago, I did a video talking about Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, why I think it should get a remake, and then a remake was announced. And even though there was some criticism upon the reveal trailer for the remake, and they've delayed the game indefinitely at this point so that they can try to make it a really good product as opposed to something that feels a little bit more like a cash grab, which isn't what it is, but I understand why some people felt that it would be perceived that way. But the point is that I said that this should be a remake, and it happened. So I'm hoping that this series that I'm doing on my channel is somehow linked to fate or something, and that by requesting remakes, they'll start happening. There is a huge market for remakes these days. It's very popular to want to go back and re-experience games with new technology. So today I'm going to be talking about Bioshock, and for people who like my Prince of Persia content, don't worry, I'll be talking more about the Prince of Persia remake and more on that IP very soon. But today I'd like to talk about Bioshock, which is actually my favorite franchise in all of gaming. I do like it more than Prince of Persia. I like it more than Arkham. I like it more than The Last of Us and Red Dead. And that's not to say that's not to like discount how much I love games like Arkham City, which is in my top 3. But it's just to say that Bioshock as a whole is just a series that knocks it out of the park for me every single time. I seriously love everything about the Bioshock games, the narrative, the locations, the voice acting, the score, the gameplay. There's just so much to love about these games. I actually always find it interesting because a lot of my subscribers who love Arkham will ask me in like Twitter DMs, like, what other games should I get into? And I suggest Bioshock, and there seems to be like this resistance to it. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it seems like it's hard for people to want to get into Bioshock. But seriously, it's worth it. Just do it. I'm going to do like a giant hour-long critique on the whole series on this channel, and I'm going to go full spoilers. So seriously, you should play the game so that I don't have to spoil it for you. It's worth it, I promise. But just to give you an idea of where the series is right now, we haven't had an installment since 2013. A 4th game has been announced, but we don't know when that's going to release or when we're going to see it. But I would argue that we're at a point with the first game that was developed in 2007, and even with Bioshock 2 and Bioshock Infinite, that it would not hurt to see a massive revamp. We got Bioshock the Collection in 2016, which was a remastered version of the games, and unfortunately it didn't do much to improve the graphical quality of the games. In some places it arguably looked even worse than it originally had, but that is very subjective. Certainly from Xbox 360 or PS3 to Xbox One and PS4, the games did look better, the graphics did look more polished, but the original versions on PC, in many respects, were better products, at least arguably. Once again, I think a lot of it comes down to subjectivity, similar to Return to Arkham, but the point is that it's difficult to say that there's a modern version of Bioshock that feels like it can stand with other modern releases. The first one, again, was developed well over a decade ago on a very small budget with a very small team. And in many regards, what makes the Bioshock games so interesting is that they are basically AAA games that are developed the same way that indie games are developed. So again, just very small team, very small budget comparatively to other games, but truthfully, I would consider the Bioshock games, especially the first one, to basically be the Star Wars of video games. It was one of the first games that had a plot that rivaled novels, where I played it and it felt like I'd read a book because it just had so much lore, so much history, and so much imagination packed in it. And there was so much creativity because even though it was developed with a small team and a small budget, they were able to create graphics that looked incredible, and they did that by just being very imaginative with the locations and just creating a lot of attention to detail. And I'm not saying that this was the first game to do that or the only game to do it, but it is a huge inspiration for many games that followed. For example, Batman Arkham Asylum, Rocksteady has cited very many times that Bioshock was a huge influencer in regards to how they developed that game. And so I think that just the impact that it had not only on gaming but in game development as a whole is very notable. And just the legacy of this franchise is so massive, and the community for the Bioshock games is still so big despite not having a game since 2013, that this is one of those games that I think not only deserves a remaster, but it's almost inevitable. Truthfully, the biggest question is how soon they want to do the remakes, if they want to do it as almost promotion for Bioshock 4. I think that could be smart. They could get the original fan base really excited once again to play these original games. They could reintroduce this narrative and this plot to people who have just never experienced it and set the stage for Bioshock 4, depending on how much they connect it narratively, there is the argument to be made that it won't really feel like a direct continuation of these games. But in any case, I think that it would be well worth the investment to do a remake of the game. And even though it still holds up fairly well, especially for the time it was made and the way in which it was developed, there are those clunky elements that come with age, with any game. You know, the graphics do not hold up extremely well. Even though the environments are still gorgeous to look at, the character models could use an update. A lot of the environments would look even better if they were developed from the ground up for PS5, Xbox Series X. Another thing is that there was a lot that they actually couldn't put in this game and a lot that they had to work around, again, because of the restrictions that they had as a team with money and resources. And one thing that I've always made the case for with remakes is that they should feel like a director's cut. So going back to Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time remake, my biggest criticism is that it's almost being treated like a one-to-one recreation. It looks like the cutscenes are going to be told from the exact same angles with the exact same dialogue, and it's essentially just a one-to-one remake. But if you're going to go to all that trouble of recreating the entire environment, of recreating every single performance in the game, I don't know why you wouldn't try to make it more of the director's cut and really just add a lot of those things that couldn't be in the original version of the game, whether it was because technology didn't allow for it, or because you ran out of time to develop it, or because you just didn't think it would necessarily work. It would be interesting, for example, if in a Batman Arkham Asylum remake, if they reintroduced the Mad Hatter's Maze, which was supposed to be a part of the original game and they just couldn't find a place for it in the story, if they reintroduced that as a side mission in Arkham Asylum and said there is now 20 extra minutes of side content in the game, we've changed the final boss battle with Joker, and they could do the same thing with Bioshock. The final boss in this game is known for being a little bit anticlimactic, so they could do an overhaul there and use the technology to create a much more exciting finale to the game. In many ways, actually, this kind of seems like a no-brainer for them to remake this game, and the reason is that by today's standards, this would actually be a fairly easy game to make. I'm not saying that they should just give this to a team of like 20 developers and give them a budget of $5 and say, okay, you better make it better than the original. You know, definitely give them the resources and the time and just the ability to make a far superior experience to the original, at least in regards to the technology surrounding it. But also, you know, I think that this would be a much cheaper game to make than probably even Bioshock 4 or whatever they're making it for. And same really goes for Bioshock 2 and Bioshock Infinite. Infinite would probably be the most difficult to recreate, but at the same time, I just think that it's worth it. These games have just such a strong legacy, and I do believe that it's worth updating them for current technology. I don't think that's the case with every game. I do think that there are a lot of games that don't really ever need to be touched again, just because it's not really worth it, you know, as long as there's a backwards compatible port. That's really all you need, and they're just sort of games of their time. But then there are other games like Arkham Asylum, like Prince of Persia, like Bioshock, that I do think deserve that treatment of being updated for a new generation of players just based on their legacy alone. But anyways, thanks you guys so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments below what games you'd like to see get a remake, and we'll see you guys in the next one.